My mother's voice was calm, almost gentle when she said it. Just tell them you were driving, sweetheart. It's not a big deal. Nobody has to know it was Paige. I was standing in a hospital waiting room at 11 p.m., still in the blazer I'd worn to Chambers that morning, staring at my mother while a man 2 rooms away was being stabilized after my sister's car hit him at 35 miles an hour. And my mother wasn't asking me to comfort her. She was asking me to lie to a police officer, to falsify a statement, to take the blame for a hit and run. She had no idea what I actually did for a living. None of them did. Not my mother, not my father, not Paige. For 6 years, I had let my family believe I was something in law, a phrase my mother used at church potlucks when people asked, waving her hand vaguely like the details were beneath discussion. What she didn't know, standing in that hallway asking me to commit a federal crime on her daughter's behalf, was that the woman she was asking was a sitting United States federal judge. My name is Vivian Cole, and I'm 38 years old. Before I tell you what happened in that hallway, and what happened in the 6 months after it, you need to understand why my own family didn't know what I'd spent 17 years building. Growing up, my sister Paige was the golden child. Not because she tried harder, but because she needed less correcting. She smiled easily, made friends easily, never argued with our parents about curfews or grades. I was the difficult one. Serious, quiet, always with a book, always asking questions that made dinner conversations uncomfortable. My father used to say, only half joking, "Vivian's going to argue her way into a courtroom someday." He had no idea how right he was, and by the time I actually did, I had stopped telling him things. The distance between me and my family didn't happen all at once. It happened in small withdrawals year after year until one day I looked up and realized I hadn't told them anything real about my life in almost a decade. It started in law school. I called home excited after my first year, ranked top of my class, and my mother's response was, "That's nice, what, honey? Did you hear Paige got promoted to assistant manager?" I laughed it off then. I told myself it didn't matter, that achievements weren't a competition, that I wasn't keeping score, but I was. I just stopped telling them the score. When I made law review, I mentioned it once, briefly, at Thanksgiving. My father nodded and asked if that meant I'd be making more money soon, because Paige needed help with her car payment and maybe I could look into co-signing something. I remember sitting at that table, 24 years old, watching the conversation slide from my accomplishment to my sister's car loan in under 30 seconds, and something in me quietly closed a door. I clerked for a federal appellate judge after graduation. I told my parents I got a good job with the courts. Vague enough to be true, vague enough that nobody asked follow-up questions. Because in my family, follow-up questions were reserved for Paige's promotions, Paige's relationships, Paige's life. By the time I was appointed to the federal bench at 34, one of the youngest judges confirmed it that year, I had a system in place without ever consciously designing it. I let them believe I was something in law. I never lied outright. I simply stopped correcting the vagueness because every time I'd tried to share something real in the past, it had been met with distraction, minimization, or redirected straight back to Paige. My husband, Marcus, thought it was strange at first how little my parents knew. "They don't even know what courthouse you work in," he said once, not unkindly, just observing. I told him it was easier this way. I told myself the same thing for 6 years. I didn't realize how much that silence would end up protecting me and protecting the truth until the night my mother called asking me to lie for Paige in a hit-and-run investigation, with absolutely no idea who she was actually asking. The call came at 10:40 p.m. on a Thursday. My mother's number, which almost never showed up outside of holidays, lighting up my phone while I was reviewing sentencing memoranda at my kitchen table. "Vivian, thank God. You need to come to St. Augustine Memorial. It's Paige. There's been an accident." She said accident the way you'd say weather, soft, minimizing, already shaping the story before I'd even asked a single question. I told her I was on my way, grabbed my coat, and drove the 18 minutes to the hospital faster than I should have. My mother met me in the waiting room, her face pale but composed in that particular way she had of managing a crisis by managing everyone's perception of it. My father sat 2 chairs down, silent, staring at the floor tiles. Paige was in an exam room. Minor injuries, she'd tell me later. A cut above her eyebrow and a sprained wrist from the airbag. "What happened?" I asked. My mother's answer came fast, rehearsed already. She was driving home from Jenna's and a man he stepped out. It wasn't her fault, but the officer wants a statement and Paige is so shaken up she can barely speak straight. I asked the question that mattered. Is the man okay? My mother's eyes flicked away for half a second. He's being looked at. Broken leg, maybe worse, they're not sure yet. I found the officer down the hall, a young patrol officer named Ruiz, standing near the nurse's station with a clipboard. I introduced myself simply as Paige's sister and asked what he could tell me. He explained carefully, professionally, that witnesses had described the vehicle leaving the scene briefly before returning, that there was a 2-minute gap unaccounted for, and that toxicology results were pending on the driver. Toxicology. Pending. I walked back to my mother, and before I could say anything, she pulled me a few steps away from my father, lowered her voice, and said the sentence that would end up changing everything between us. Vivian, listen to me. When that officer asks who was driving, just say it was you. You weren't drinking tonight, you have a clean record, it'll go away so much faster. Paige has too much ahead of her to have this follow her. You understand, don't you? Just say you were driving. She said it gently. She said it like she was asking me to pick up milk on the way home. Like she wasn't asking her 38-year-old daughter to obstruct a police investigation into a hit and run involving a critically injured man. I looked at her for a long moment. Do you understand what you're asking me to do? I'm asking you to help your sister, that's all. That's what family does. I didn't answer her right away. I stood in that hallway with the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and I thought about 17 years of vagueness, of letting my family believe whatever was easiest, and I understood clearly for the first time exactly what that silence had cost me. It had taught my own mother that she could ask me to commit a felony and expect me to simply comply, because in her mind, I was still the difficult daughter with the something-in-law job, someone flexible enough to absorb whatever the family needed absorbed. Mom, I said quietly, I'm not going to lie to that officer. Her face shifted, the softness draining into something sharper. After everything this family has done for you, you can't do this one thing. She's your sister, Vivian. She hit a man with her car and left the scene for 2 minutes before coming back. That's not a favor I can do for her. That's obstruction of a criminal investigation. It's not federal, it's a local accident, don't be dramatic. I almost laughed, not from humor, from something closer to exhaustion. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully right now, because I have never told you this, and I should have told you a long time ago. She stared at me, arms crossed, waiting for what she probably assumed was going to be an excuse. I'm a federal judge. I was appointed 4 years ago. I sit on the bench for the Eastern District. I have sentenced people for exactly what you're asking me to help Paige avoid accountability for tonight. The color left my mother's face slowly, like watching ice melt in reverse. My father, who had walked up behind her without either of us noticing, stood frozen in the doorway, his mouth slightly open. That's not, you never said, why would you never tell us that? Because every time I tried to tell you something real about my life, it got redirected to Paige within 30 seconds. Because I learned a long time ago that this family only had room for one daughter's accomplishments, and it wasn't going to be mine. So I stopped offering them. I let you believe whatever was easiest, and honestly, most nights, that was fine with me. My mother's hands were shaking now. Vivian, please, if you're really a judge, you understand better than anyone how much this could ruin her life. A conviction, a record, it follows you everywhere. I understand exactly how much it could ruin her life, I said. I also understand what it does to a man's family when the person who hit him lies about who was driving. Both of those things are true at the same time, Mom. That's what accountability actually looks like. Officer Ruiz appeared at the end of the hallway then, clipboard in hand, walking toward us with the particular calm of someone about to ask questions that mattered. Ma'am, he said, looking at my mother, then at me, are we ready to take that statement? I stepped forward before my mother could speak. Officer Ruiz, I need to identify myself properly before this conversation continues. My name is Judge Vivian Cole, Eastern District Federal Court, and I need you to know that whatever statement my sister gives tonight, it will be the truth, and I will not be interfering with this investigation in any capacity. Officer Ruiz blinked once, recalibrating fast the way good officers do, and nodded. Understood, Your Honor. I'll take her statement now. My mother grabbed my arm as he walked away. Vivian, please, you're a judge. You could make this disappear. You could talk to someone, pull a string, anything. I looked at her, and for the first time in my adult life, I said something to my mother without softening at first. That's exactly why I can't. Do you understand what it would mean if a federal judge used her position to help her sister evade a hit-and-run investigation? It's not just illegal, Mom. It's the exact kind of corruption I spend my career ruling against. I didn't become this to protect my family from consequences. I became this because I believe consequences matter for everyone, including people I love. Paige gave her statement that night, the full truth this time, guided gently but firmly by Officer Ruiz's questions. She admitted she'd been texting, admitted the 2-minute gap was her panicking and driving half a block away before turning back. The man she'd hit, a construction worker named Danny Alvarez, had a broken leg and internal bruising, but he survived and he'd recover fully within 4 months. Paige was charged with reckless driving and leaving the scene, reduced from more serious charges specifically because she'd ultimately cooperated fully and voluntarily. She got probation, community service, and a suspended license for a year. Not nothing, but not the felony record it could have become if she'd stuck to the story my mother tried to build in that hallway. My relationship with my parents changed after that night. Not instantly, not dramatically, but permanently. My mother didn't speak to me for almost 3 weeks. When she finally called, she didn't apologize for asking me to lie. She apologized quietly for not knowing who her own daughter had become. 17 years, she said, her voice small in a way I'd never heard before. I didn't know you for 17 years, Vivian. I knew a version of you that fit into 30 seconds of conversation. I told her the truth. I let that happen too, Mom. I stopped trying a long time ago because it was easier than being disappointed every time. That's on both of us. We're rebuilding something now, slowly. My father asks real questions now about cases, about the work, still awkward, still learning how to hold a conversation that isn't about Paige. Paige herself sent me a letter 2 months after the accident, 4 pages, handwritten, the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. She's in therapy now. She's rebuilding her relationship with Danny Alvarez, too, in a careful, supervised way, paying restitution beyond what the court required. Here's what I learned. Silence can protect you, but it can also cost you the very thing you were trying to preserve, being truly known by the people who are supposed to love you. And sometimes the deepest act of love isn't covering for someone. It's telling the truth, even when it's the harder, colder, more uncomfortable choice in the room. That's my story. If you've ever had to choose between protecting someone and protecting the truth, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. And if this story reminded you that real love holds people accountable, share it with someone who needs to hear that today.